originalist history when history is used in the service of law. Who we are is not a question that judges can answer, whether they use history or not, but they're much more likely to be, well, they can draw upon sociology, they can draw upon demographics, they can draw upon statistics, they can draw upon the history of the United States, and they can muse on the question, who are we in 2014? I don't think that's a legal. I don't think that's a legal question. I don't think judges are competent to answer that question. Who are we? And I don't. Perhaps it's an Australian perspective. I don't see how that answer would be necessary to determine, to rule on decisions in real life disputes, which judges have to deal with.
So I'm really interested in the role of structural arguments, particularly among originalists. And it's prompted by your observation quickly, Michael, that structural arguments like Marshall and McCulloch are a lot like textual arguments. And I think I want to pause over that, because there are structural arguments that are like textual arguments. When you think about the structure of the text, the fact that the necessary and proper clause is in Article 1, Section 8, not Article 1, Section 9, or the fact that you have certain powers listed there, and there's a logic that connects a lot of them together. But oftentimes there are different kinds of structural arguments that self-identified originalists will invoke. You would make inferences from the structures and relationships, the institution that the Constitution establishes. That's what does most of the work in McCulloch. There is a supremacy principle and a means-ends principle. The ends implies reason. The case is over before he gets to any part of the text. And that's what you see when we talk about an anti-commandeering principle, when we talk about the fundamental principle of equal state sovereignty, when we talk about the modern, very robust doctrine of state sovereign immunity. So it seems to me that kind of structural reasoning, which many originalists embrace, is much further away from the text or architecture, the way Akhil talks about it, and much further along towards purposes, consequences, your basic vision of what the national ethos is. After all, if Marshall doesn't think it's a good idea to march armies across the continent, then Maryland wins that case.
Well, I think I agree with essentially all of your observations there. I mean, I think that there are structural arguments that are more closely tied to text, and then there's structural, or so-called, I'm going to put scare quotes around it, structural arguments that partake more of free-floating analogic reasoning. And it's like any kind of textual argument and textual structural argument. There will be sound reasoning, and there will be some that will be less sound reasoning. I've got a review of Akhil Amar's book coming out. When it talk about analogical reasoning and structural principles, Akhil